Welcome to the Chess Channel, the channel where you can learn loads. On this channel, we have covered a variety of different games. How different is this game we have today going to be from any other? Well, this will be your call and nobody else's. Today we have a game that was played only very recently. It comes from the Speed Chess Championship of 2022 and it is between Gukesh of India and the undisputed world champion Carlsen of Norway. Carlsen is not only super fast but his calculations are also very precise. So what chances does Gukesh have to beat the likes of Magnus Carlsen? This is one heck of a question. The Indian team, which includes Gukesh, have been all over the press. Gukesh himself is only 16 and is already a superstar, not just in India but in the entire world. Today's game is one of the 30 played. Before we look at it, just a word on the time controls used. This encounter today uses a time control of 1 minute and 1 second. Magnus had already won this match by now, but let's see how he does his magic. How fast are you in a 1-minute game and how accurate are your calculations overall? His opponent Gukesh is already a star, and every chess enthusiast needs no introduction here. Gukesh is on 16 years young, and he is already a player well above the 2,700 mark. We know from what is said, Gukesh lacks online experience, but give him some time and he will overcome any problems that may exist. With this info in mind, let us get this game off the ground. Gukesh has this side of the board and given Carlsen has played badly, and this is something Magnus admits himself, saying, he still never disappointed anyone. His record is impeccable. With an e4 opening, Magnus opened up the diagonal. Gukesh shoots off for the center, and via this knight move, Gukesh too develops his queenside knight. d5 by Carlsen led to the direct attack on the knight, and with Carlsen squeezing this knight into the center of the board, Gukesh could have taken, but he ignores this taking, and this is what he does instead. It's a very interesting move, but much will depend on how this game progresses. Carlsen here was not going to give Gukesh any breathing space. Without any delay, he challenged this pawn in the center. Gukesh ignores this type of development, and rather than engage, this is how he plays it. In a bullet game such as this one, you could expect bishop g4, and should this take place, this little push to f3 would speak for itself. What happened after this thrust to h4 was for Carlsen to take in the center. With Gukesh instantly charging after this knight, Carlsen retreats this knight to safety. And of course the continuation from this point looks relatively simple. Gukesh not only removes this central pawn, but this knight on d6 is yet under another attack. For those who are interested in the opening used in this game, Carlsen adopted something very close to home. Does anyone know this opening? What he used was the Norwegian defense, but this is not something you didn't know. The Norwegian defense is way too popular an opening not to know it. With Magnus backing off this knight to the 7th. This pawn in the center is under fire, but with a variety of moves, Gukesh can easily cover him. Can you guesstimate how he covers here? He went for this avenue of play. From what you can gather here, Gukesh appears to also have some central control. With Magnus getting out his other knight, Gukesh pushes along with this pawn. What happened next is not always clear. We are not talking about the few immediate moves, but the moves that were played throughout the game. In bullet games, mistakes and blunders will take place, but it is the person who makes them that are going to be punished, or those who are about to capitalize when an error is made. In this point in the game, Carlsen too pushes on without engaging. Gukesh once again ignores everything and chooses for this avenue of play. There is an immediate problem in the center of the board, and it is very likely this pawn on e5 is not going to be able to stay here long. Magnus, being the real master of this game, could have gone on and get rid of this pawn from f4, and yet he bypasses. He instead uses this pawn on g5 to chase after the knight. It's a very clever initiative, but is it sound too? Given this game is played instantly, this is one position that you do not get to see very often. Gukesh can go for 1, 2, 3, 4 different options using the knight. In the end he centralized the knight, and offers Carlsen the opportunity to either swap or try something else. That something else might involve this bishop development, but if you choose for this type of continuation, be prepared to pay dearly. Once this pawn finds the sixth, that would be it. Should the knight on d4 come off, there are 2 ways or possible 3 ways to continue. Actually, this is wrong. There is a 4th option you can exercise here. 1. Is to take the knight on d4 with the knight. 2. You can take the bishop with a check. 3. Is to get rid of the knight with an incoming check. And 4 is to go on and eliminate the knight from d4 using the queen. The worst move to execute would be to take the knight on d4 with the queen. If you take the knight, this takes would guarantee an additional bishop or knight that are positioned on the 7th. If you move the knight out of danger, if you do go on to remove the bishop, even if the queen captures this pawn, the damage is already inflicted. Queen e2, and something like this bishop repositioning and black's position worsens with each progressive response. Knight e6 to go after this bishop is going to stop the king from being able to castle. Rook g8 will cover for the bishop in case the knight takes him, but again, however you choose to play it, black is busted. If you decide to bring the bishop into the 6th, chasing now after the queen in this way, may get black to try and retaliate in this way, but even with this idle threat, the knight can easily go places. We can work out if you take on b7, this nifty check that follows will drop the knight, but even if this happens, the likelihood white loses is very minimal. If we alternatively try this bishop move, if the knight comes under fire, both knight b3 or knight d3 do nicely. Let us try only one line to see how far we can get. With the knight coming back to b3, why can't the bishop take this pawn on the 2nd? If you do go for him, can you evaluate this position and would you be able to shed some light? What can Gukesh do here and how can he maintain this excellent position? Through rook d1 works a treat, because Carlsen would be able to castle. If we come back by one move, this bishop move would be the icing on the cake. If the rook comes off and no one will let him stand, once the bishop is removed, yes, Carlsen is most likely to castle, but his position is very bad. Attack the queen in this way, back her off to this outpost, and if you don't like g3, what if you try something more drastic? Can you suggest something using this position? It's this push to the 4th. This move is a true masterpiece of a response. It doesn't look like much, but this is as good as things get for white. Should this pawn bite the dust, once you repay the favor by capturing him with a check, e6 may look strong enough, but Carlsen would be feeling the pressure from all sides. Either knight d4 or bishop d3 would do nicely. Bishop d3 for example, rook d8, bishop c2 and the few remaining moves you can try and fill in. With the mate threat on d1 now being nullified, Carlsen would have nowhere to go. But given this is a bullet, how much is actually going to miss? If we return to an earlier position, rather than b6 to go after the knight, what if Carlsen tries this knight move? Do you protect the bishop or do you go for something else? Given that the bishop is protected, how far ahead would castles get you? Should the knight be handed over for the bishop? If you go after the knight, knight e6 would be the best accomplishment. There is a nifty trick in the making, and if you blink, you would pay for it. Rook b8 for example is going to run into this takes on d6, and should you decide to get rid of the rook, this fork on c7 would be self-explanatory. This is how easy you would drop the queen and for what. Coming back to the actual game, things went on in a tangent. No bishop d7 for the reasons we saw, but Carlsen first trades the knight to the knight. And as soon as this took place, this is how the World Championship plays it. Bishop d3 was followed by this vicious attack on the knight. Gukesh was about to try something. He moved in with this check, and from out of nowhere, Magnus being Magnus does surprise not just Gukesh but everyone who was watching this game. This is the move he went for. Who puts the king on f7 and what was Carlsen thinking? With the knight now backing off to safety, Carlsen develops his bishop, and what Gukesh does here was something he never had the time to do earlier. Can you see what he does? He got his king to safety. e6 led to Gukesh to drop his bishop back to the 2nd, but this was his worst nightmare. Why is this the biggest blunder in the game, and was Carlsen able to take advantage? As soon as Carlsen slipped in his queen into the rim of the chessboard, the alarm bells were ringing. If you panic here, you are also done. And this is what Gukesh did. He just panicked. Bishop e3 would have been the best option to go for, but as soon as this pawn advances to the third, this would be it. Rook f3 to allow the king to slip through is not going to cut it. It's not because queen h2 is coming, but there is a far better and stronger move in the making. Can you spot it? It's this knight jump right into the fourth and it is game over. The only way to stop the mate would be to hand over the rook for the pawn, and even if this knight is now removed, the end is very near. Before doing anything, just take with a check, and when the king is forced to the very edge of the board, take the bishop too, but once the queen comes under fire, queen h4 is a way out but not good enough. Once the bishop chases after her in this way, queen d1 is not going to cut it. Just go on to get rid of this pawn too, and white falls apart. Queen f1 to force off the queens is going to happen, but not in the way you expect it. Rather than black getting rid of the queens, what if Carlsen went for this rook repositioning? If the queens now do come off, what remains is child's play and anyone can finish things off very easily. If we return to the actual game, Gukesh tried an entirely different move. He never went for a bishop move, but this is how he plays it. What followed next is quite similar to the principle we just went through. Carlsen without any delay pushed on with the pawn. Gukesh very fast repositions his bishop to allow the king some leeway, but even this was not strong and good enough. Carlsen capitalized right away. He moved in with a check, the king is now pushed west, and with Magnus moving in the knight, what could Gukesh do? He could still go for this bishop move to e3, but even this is not going to do it. Take the bishop, take the knight, and this would have been another possible variation to consider. It's totally losing for white, but you try and finish off in just 8 seconds. However, returning to the game, as soon as the knight jumped into the fourth, Gukesh had been eliminated, and this move along to get rid of the knight had in fact triggered a checkmate in just 3 moves. As soon as Carlsen delivered this nifty check, the king was ejected to the second, and with Magnus getting rid of this pawn from the second with yet another check, king e3 resulted to this spectacular finish, and this is how Gukesh gets punished in a game that lasted only 24 moves. And this is what Carlsen actually does. He is unbeatable in bullet games and no one can dispute this. In the very finals, Carlsen lost many games in the blitz portion using a 5 minutes time control. In the 3 minutes portion, he did better but came the bullet using a single minute on the clock. Carlsen excelled. The reigning champion in the end ended up losing the finals because his opponent had created a huge lead in the first part of the final. Even when this was the case, Carlsen at some stage equalized, but in the end the best person won it. And this was our last video to date. There is more to follow for sure, as we have another fresh cheating scandal with an candidate being expelled from a recent tournament that has just ended days ago. In the meantime, we sincerely hope you enjoyed and look forward to seeing you again. God bless and take good care.